Good evening, good evening. Another Tuesday is here with us. I hope everybody had a good weekend and the week has started very well. So last week was session 15, titled The Genesis, and the highlights of that was, I think when I talked about when you go into any business space or any area that you choose to participate in regarding business, you have to do your homework well and know who the incumbent is or the top dogs are in that space so that you will know how to align and also how to play or how to play, right? So in our case in Ghana, regarding the ATM business, obviously NCR was a top dog. NCR owned, I could easily say, more than 85% of the business, or close to 90%. And brand recognition was in there, they've been around since independence. And anytime you find yourself in a business space where there's a player that owns more than 70% of that space, and the dynamics are a lot different, it's not easy to outsmart, topple that incumbent. And even though you may win one or two things here and there, I mean, they may not be that significant. And these are things that I didn't know at the time, and these are things that I know now. And for the new businesses that I find myself in, I take into account all of these things. So, what were some of the strengths of the incumbent? One, NCR had all the big banks that had the financial muscle. Standard Chartered, Barclays, Ghana Commercial Bank, which is our biggest local national bank. Uh, they had the biggest number of branches in town. And GCV actually was also a shareholder in NCR, if that is accurate. That's what I know, but I've not cited any documents, but that's what I've heard in the past. So when you have an incumbent controlling that top cream spot, and you don't have access to it, then your market is very limited and very limited. So when we were starting, I didn't know that there were group deals that we could not easily crack. I thought that, well, once we had a good product, a good service on the ground, I could approach all of this, big banks that had a muscle. So it was a hard reality for me, but I will say that it served me well, given that it was a tough realization and was very difficult to accept and work with. Secondly, what the incumbent NCR did very well was this. They also managed to secure the good off-site locations like the malls. Okay, so anytime a mall is being put up, they will get access to the ATM gallery, and the spaces were designed only for NCR ATMs. So what that meant was that our ATMs, Diebold or Winco and all of that could not easily go in there because they were specifically designed to accommodate only NCR ATMs. And what I also realized was that in Ghana, for example, most banks will always copy other banks. So if a bank has decided to put an ATM in the mall, other banks will also want to go do that. So what it means is that they will have to procure NCR ATMs. So even though we had our own wins, NCR had things on the ground that solidified or gave them more power. So outside of that too, now because NCR was the market player, when the national switch, Gibbs wanted to enable e-switch on ATMs, the first brand they spent their resources and time and attention on was NCR because they wanted to make sure that if it worked on NCR, then it means that they had a bigger chunk of the market. So what it meant was that, the other brands were lagging, were behind. So, but these are all things that at that time, let's say 2007, 8, 9, thereabout, I didn't understand the implications of all of these things. But now, 15 years down the line, I understand the implications of all of those things. So when you find yourself in a business space, you have to be mindful of, this kind of uh, activities because if you're not in the pole position or second or third, then it's an uphill battle and you're going to waste resources, you're going to waste time, and it's not fun. So those were the highlights of the Genesis. Okay, today's is session 16 entitled a first mover advantage. So whilst we're doing the ATM business, Cornet also not just into transaction processing, we're also a value-added service provider. So we secured electronic dealership for airtime with all the telcos, and we had a very good relationship. We still do have a very good relationship with MTN, and we managed, as Cornet, we managed to secure a printing deal. Okay, at that time, MTN was looking at printing 1 CD, 2 CD vouchers. Okay, instead of scratch cards, because the scratch cards were expensive, they were being imported, and they wanted to print only 1 CD, 2 CDs value. So what it meant was that they couldn't really do it on the expensive scratch cards. They needed an alternative, and because we were in the business of printing and providing pin mailer services to the banks, we're able to refit those pin mailers into little vouchers, which were smaller than um, than the scratch cards and which were less, costly compared to the scratch cards. So Cornet managed to secure that deal. We were not an official dealer for MTN. The MTN dealers were like big, big dons. He had big, big boys. Okay, he had one Ghanaian owner. I think that was Mobile Choice, and the rest all Lebanese powered largely. So these were like guys who were well entrenched and well connected and had been distributors for MTN for a very long time. So out of nowhere, Cornet secures this deal to print the vouchers for the dealers for them to sell. So when we got a deal, we worked with MTN to determine, the volumes that we may need. So we designed the vouchers. I got it done in India, my Indian office, sent them the design. They printed samples of the vouchers, sent them over. We got thermal printers and we printed the vouchers. So instead of scratching, you open it just like a pin mailer to reveal the pin in it with the instructions. So when we got that done, now the next thing was, okay, we had tested it, MTN had approved it, and it was ready for market. We got a first set of vouchers airlifted by Emirates Cargo. So when they came in, the distributors came for it and started distributing and selling. But what we did not anticipate was the demand for it. So what we were doing was we were constantly printing in India, which is the stock, that's the voucher stock, right? And then airlifted them into Ghana. Now here's the thing, when you are airlifting paper is very heavy, and airlifting is very expensive compared to sea freight. So all our margins were being eroded because I was airlifting. I was airlifting because I also wanted to make sure that I was not, denying MTN of the vouchers, because now the product was out, there was high demand for it. So it meant that I had to sacrifice. The alternative was, okay, airlift some and then later do sea freight. So whilst we were servicing, obviously there's other dealers who were traditional Kahuna, dealers also lobbied and said, you know what, the speed at which Cornet was printing was stifling their business. Therefore, they also wanted to print. So I fought that as much as I could, but there were bigger powers. So now MTN allowed for the other distributors of MTN to also print. So what they did was they took our design and they wanted to standardize it. So they took our design, all right, and they also got their stock of paper in and then started printing. But this is what happened, and this is where it gets very interesting. So now we had different vouchers on the market. And out of nowhere, customers will buy the vouchers, open it, and instead of seeing the PIN, which is the code that you use to top up, okay, your mobile phone, there's nothing in it. So thermal printing uses carbon. So now, because all of these guys were printing, quality checks were not in there and stuff like that. So now there was an issue on the market. Now people buy scratch cards, vouchers, and as we see in a local parlance, city, there's no PIN, and that's like 419, right? Because you've taken somebody's money and you've not been able to give them the PIN to load. So whilst we were all grappling with this challenge, one of the other distributors took his time, Mobile Choice took his time. And he did not go with the five earlier providers, which includes, Cornet, using the carbon thermal printing technology. He went laser. Okay, so he got his own laser printers, got his own quality stock of paper, and was printing laser. So his product at the end of the day won because he did not have the problem of carbon where, it was a hit or miss because there are times when the pin was not in the voucher or it was faint. With laser, it is laser, so it was always in there. So at that point, guess what? Mobile Choice won the market. All the carbon printers, thermal printers, carbon printers, we had to cease business. On a good day, we were printing about $2 million of airtime value. And for each voucher that we printed, we get, our cut out of it. So, but why did Mobile Choice win? He studied the early providers, obviously Cornet and then the rest, realized where our challenges were regarding our technology and what we were offering. Secondly, he also took his time and didn't do airlifting, shipped his stuff, via the sea freight. So at the end of it, what happened? He won the business. So in business, you can sometimes have first mover. You can be the first. It doesn't mean that it's yours. When you're the first mover, it means that others can really study you, see where you are not good at, and then do better and to take you. But for me, being the first mover, that lesson was priceless. One, I had established that I can always be first to a market. Two, what I also learned from it was not only should I be first, but barriers to entry should be very, very high. Meaning that whatever we choose to do next, the barriers to entry should be so high that it won't be easy for any competitor to easily do it. And if they're going to do it, it should really cost them and should take them time. And whilst we are not standing, we are still moving forward. Then obviously we are still going to maintain our lead. So as we all know in Ghana, anytime somebody brings something from somewhere, China, you start selling, the next minute everybody else is doing the same thing, they are copying you, right? So when you are innovating, when you're into a service business, don't look for things that anybody can easily replicate. Because you're going to spend your time to do the hard work, and somebody's going to come in, study what you have done, and then outmuscle you. So try as much as possible to go for stuff that has serious intellectual property, IP in there. Use a lot of cognitive power. Use a lot of science if possible. And also, if there's serious finance behind it, make sure you blitz scale, meaning that you have a lot of serious money backing it. Because it hurts when you have an opportunity, you put all your efforts into it, and somebody outsmarts you just because, and when you're leading, you don't really get to see your blind sides. Your blind side, you don't get to see them. So somebody on the fringes gets to see them and they can overtake you. So if you're not first mover, it's okay. If you are, be mindful of your blind side if you can, but learn from it. Okay. So today's, as I said, is what? First mover. So that lesson really helped us in our next big innovation, which I'll talk about later, which ultimately allowed us to own 100% of a market, which we still own today. Now, when we did that business, I'll talk about it later. I don't want to give too much away. Now we're able to now work with all the banks that we didn't have the opportunity to work with. Because guess what? Now we innovated, we moved into a blue ocean, and we built fences using competitive advantage in ways that our competition couldn't. So even though NCR beat us pushing boxes, when it came to that business, we fought them. We fought them. So the other lesson here is this. As I started these sessions, I've been doing a lot of reflections. And what I've realized is this. All the things that I and my business have done in the past they've all been learning opportunities, learnings. They've all been learnings. So there are good wins in there, and there have been interesting failures, there have been interesting challenges. But what I've realized is that all of those things were preparing us for something bigger. So when you hear me talk about we are going to touch 1 billion lives in the next 20 years, I'm not just saying it for shaggy reasons. No, you're going to see it feely feely. How we're going to do it, and we're going to do it together. So when you're doing something and you encounter challenges, don't despair. Don't be discouraged because you are learning. And I can tell you that, guess what? Embrace those moments because those moments are rare. A lot of times people are comfortable with all the goody goodies all the time. Things are working. They are coasting. The moment you don't coast, then things fall apart. And things fall apart. So embrace setbacks, embrace adversities because that is when you learn the most. That is when you even get to know who you are. Remember, I used to talk about know thyself. Today, based on those experiences, there are a lot of things I know about myself. There are times when I look back and I wish I had worked longer in a corporate world because I only did 3 years at Booz Allen. Then I decided to, do entrepreneurship on my own and stuff like that. So there are times when I feel inadequate because I didn't really work long. So as much as academically understand, because I've been to school, I'm educated, I think that if I had worked longer in a decent, company, been exposed to the different business units and how they work and things like that, I think as a young person who was doing serious business at 33, 34, things would have been a lot different. Okay, somebody may say that, oh, okay, Zuckerberg and all of these guys who dropped out in the US, they didn't have all of those things. That system is different. Now, developing world and where we are, I think that we should allow ourselves to also experience and learn and study so that when you start, you have a good foundation. Because if you're not strong, you're going to give in. You're going to give in. So when I look back at it, I would also say that that's where I think if I could have done it differently, I would, but I'm not sure because I've always been driven. But the flip side of it is this. Now at 50, I think I have a good understanding of entrepreneurship. I have a good understanding of how human beings operate. I have a good understanding of markets. But here's the thing. At 50, if God has given us 70, I have 20 years left. Am I going to work for the next 20 years? So you also have your mortality staring at you. So that is when a lot of times people would say, you know what, Charlie, me now, what's left? Charlie, let me just chill, man. What do I want in this world? And people just settle. No, don't settle. Don't settle. Because guess what? At 55, at 60, you can still have fun with whatever dreams you have. Okay? But embrace the challenges. Next week, I'm going to talk about our international experiences. Because remember, Connacht is not just Ghanaian. The lessons and then the experiences that we had in going to Nigeria, going to Liberia, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Cameroon, Zambia, and all of that. And then also the retreat. Also the retreat. When you are comfortable, you're not growing. Always position yourself to be in a state of discomfort. I have done that, and there are times when I have been burnt massively. There are times when I look back and I wish I didn't do whatever I did that got me into whatever situation. But all of those experiences is what molds you into a lion, into an eagle, into a lioness, into a tigress, into somebody who is daring, somebody who wants to effect change and all of that. So let us not just settle. Let us not just accept where we are and be okay with it. No, because I see a lot of people just uh, being scared, fear. Why should you be afraid? To not be afraid. If you have any dream, If you want to be a doctor, you want to get PhD, go for it. Go for it. At least put in the effort and don't finish. At least you would have learned something, you would have made some friends. You would have learned from attempting to do something and not finishing. You want to be an MD of a bank. You want to be an MD of a telco. You want to be a pastor in your church. Dream it, pray about it, but do the work. And do the work consistently. A lot of times we start stuff and then we stop. We start and we stop. But for you to succeed, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. And that's where most of us fall short. So, my brothers and sisters, this is it for today. Until we meet again next week, whatever you're going through, hold on. Don't let go. You're going to be okay. Take care. I love you guys. Good night.